All right, guys, welcome to the second quarter. So things are set up a little bit differently this 9 weeks just for the ease for both of us. So to start out with the legislative branch for this 9 weeks, take your pretest. And remember, it's a pretest. I'm not expecting you to know anything. And then I want to show you your Edgenuity expectations. So I'm not putting them in individually as a grade. Instead, I'm going to go into focus and put in your overall Edgenuity grade this time. So it's not cluttering up our Canvas course. So your Edgenuity expectations for the legislative branch unit are the House of Representatives and the Senate. And this is in the second quarter of government, so please note that you're going to have to skip the first section in Edgenuity to get to the modules below. I did give you free movement, so you should be able to do that. All right, so let's go back to modules. And so you'll see that I have it broken down into headings with your reading essentials and quizzes and discussion questions. And then at the end, you have your post-test. So I'm going to go over the first PowerPoint. So this PowerPoint encompasses the whole unit. So I'm going to click it, and you guys have this in your own modules. All right, so we're talking about the legislative branch. So we're going to talk about the members of Congress, the organization of Congress, the powers, and how to pass a bill. So there are two houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and this is called a bicameral legislature. It's established by Article 1. Bicameral means that there's two houses, because like a bicycle has two wheels, bicameral means two houses. The members of the House of Representatives, there are 435 members. There's a limit. In 1789, they only had 65 representatives because they didn't have as many states. Each member represents a congressional district, which is an area of a state that includes about 600,000 people. And the number of districts depends on a state's population. So that's one of the things that makes the House of Representatives distinct from the Senate, is that it has so many members, 435, and it depends on the state's population. Every 10 years, Congress decides how districts will be apportioned or distributed by using the census. If a state's population decreases, the state's going to lose seats. If a state's population increases, the state will gain seats. So that's why it's so important to fill out the census every 10 years. We just did one now in 2020. If a state loses or gains seats, district lines need to be redrawn. And so you see, so this is one district. They draw them so funky, and one of those reasons is because of gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is the practice of redrawing district lines to favor a person or a political group. So let's watch this gerrymandering video. Pardon the ad.
Citizens each get one vote and are divided into ranges. Each range will elect one representative sent to the newly created General Council. To best understand how the system works, let's take a look at a small colony where there are just two political parties, the Buffalo and Jackalope. This colony is divided into 4 ranges. In the first election, Jackalope candidates for the 2 of them, and Buffalo candidates for the rest. All is well for several election cycles until the Animal Kingdom census taker comes around and shows the population is both grown. To better represent the larger population, a new seat is added to the General Council, so the range's boundaries must be redrawn. This is where the trouble begins. Redrawing electoral boundaries is a huge political problem. To help them, the representatives of the General Council hire a Weasley consultant to figure out where the new boundaries should go. If Weasel draws rectangular boundaries, everything will be okay, because the General Council will, as close as possible, reflect how the citizens vote. However, Weasel doesn't do this. Instead, he tells the Buffalo Party that, for Paris, he can turn their slim majority into a landslide victory in the election. With a supermajority on the Jungle Council, the Buffalo wouldn't have to listen to the pesky Jackalope filibusters anymore, so the Buffalo party can win an additional seat without any voters switching allegiance. What Weasel and the Buffalo have done is called gerrymandering, the intentional changing of electoral boundaries for their benefit. Several election cycles later, the underrepresented and disgruntled Jackalope party approaches Weasel and asks if he can manipulate the ranges to be in their favor instead of the Buffalo's. Why indeed he can. Using the same trick, Weasel packs Buffalo voters into a few ranges and spreads the rest among the Jackalope's supporters. After the election, the Jackalopes, who represent the minority of voters, are now, nonetheless, the majority party on the Jungle Council. This is the terrible power of gerrymandering. Weasel can take the exact same voters and get either party to win the election. Unsurprisingly, Weasel's business grows, and eventually every colony in the animal kingdom pays him to gerrymander their ranges. With so many clients, Weasel now uses his computer to test hundreds of thousands of range combinations with elaborate statistical models of voter behavior to get the results he needs. Queen Lion has seen what Weasel is up to and banishes him from her kingdom. But the census taker reminds her that ranges still need to be redrawn as the population changes. So how is it going to be decided? Queen Lion suggests the obvious solution: a bipartisan committee must agree on all new range boundaries. This seems like a good idea. After all, if both parties have to agree on the ranges, then they must end up being fair to everyone. But after a few election cycles using this solution, Queen Lion notices that she always sees the same faces on the Jungle Council. Representatives almost never get defeated in their elections. It turns out that the interests of the representatives and the interests of the citizens are not the same. Citizens want elections where the candidates have to earn their vote. These are close elections where either candidate has a chance of winning. But representatives don't want close elections. They want safe elections. Elections where they run in a range that is filled with supporters. Because the representatives are in charge of the boundaries, they make the safest range as possible. So bipartisan committees are not enough. To truly fix gerrymandering, there are three options. The first is to set up a politically independent commission of appointed experts and judges to draw the boundaries. Independent commissions are much better than bipartisan committees, but still not ideal because they usually group similar areas together so the elections are uncompetitive. And there's always the possibility that the independent commission is not as independent as it appears. The second option is to let math decide boundaries. There are a number of ways to mathematically divide an area into equally populous ranges. The simplest example of this is called the shortest split line method. Find the shortest line that splits the voters in twain and repeat as necessary until all the ranges remain. This is much better than an independent commission, but it does have the problem of occasionally producing skewed election results just due to pure bad luck the way boundaries are drawn. But by publishing the algorithm used, all citizens can check the results and be confident that there is no intentional bias in the system. The last solution is an unexpected one. Hire back the Weasel and embrace gerrymandering. But this time, pay him to make the winners most closely match the voters as a whole. While it seems unsavory, this is actually the best way to avoid disproportionate representation, which is, by far, the worst problem of gerrymandering. But considering these three solutions leaves Queen Lion grumpy. The first two are improvements, but still may result in uncompetitive elections or disproportionate results, while the third just feels wrong. Gerrymandering to avoid the problems of gerrymandering is odd. Remembering what she learned about voting before, she realizes that all this gerrymandering is really just a symptom of a more fundamental problem, the method by which each citizen gets only one vote and elects only one representative. There are ways to eliminate gerrymandering and restore competitive elections to make her citizens happy. But to do that, Queen Lion is going to have to make some big fundamental changes to her democracy.
All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. So congressional elections still in the House of Representatives are held on the even years. So this means that House of Representatives get elected on even years. And each term is 2 years. So if a representative dies, the state governor calls a special election. For the Senate, so now we're switching over to the other house. For the Senate, there's only 100 members, and there's only 2 per state, because there's 50 states, so we have 100 people. In 1789, there were 26 senators. So can you guess how many states we had? Take 26 divided by 2, and there were 13. The senators represent the whole state. So in the House of Representatives, they represent that small area of 600,000 people. But the senators, they take the whole state. And the Senate elections are held on even numbered years, so 2010, 2012, and each term is 6 years. If a senator dies, the governor appoints a replacement until the next election, so he doesn't call for a special session. For the House of Representatives, how do you get in? How are you eligible? So qualifications according to Article 1 of the Constitution. You have to be at least 25 years old, United States citizen for at least 7 years, and a resident of the state representative. So in just a few short years, you guys can run for the House of Representatives. For the Senate, qualifications according to Article 1 of the Constitution, you must be at least 30 years old. You have to be a United States citizen for at least 9 years and a resident of the state represented. For all of the legislative branch, for all the Congress, that's both houses, their annual salary is $165,200. Members have offices in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and they receive an allowance to pay their own staff. Member perks, they get free trips to their home state so they get to travel back and forth. The franking privilege is the right to mail official letters and packages for free, and they have immunity in court. Rules of conduct. Each house has its own written rules for conducting business. You can find these in the Constitution under Article 1, the House Rules and Manual, and the Senate Manual. For example, in the Senate Manual, it talks about a filibuster, or a method of delaying action on a bill by making long speeches. Expulsion. If a member commits a serious offense, that member could be expelled from office. Expulsion means that a person must give up their seat. So it's just like getting expelled from school. You're done. You're out. Examples of expulsion: the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, Michael Myers and Raymond Lederer. Actually, 1981, he actually resigned before the vote of expulsion occurred due to their involvement in accepting bribes. Censure. This is a less serious offense, but it may bring a vote of censure or formal disapproval of a member's actions. A censured member must stand alone at the front of the House or Senate and listen as their charges are read. So it's kind of like a referral. Examples of censure: the most famous is Joseph McCarthy. His charge was that he failed to cooperate with the Subcommittee on Rules and Administration and repeatedly abused the members who were trying to carry out the assigned duties. The most recent was Charles Rangel. His charge was an ethics rules violation, which is improper use of campaign contributions and a failure to report income when filing taxes. So now how Congress is organized. During representatives' term, they serve the sessions. A session starts on January 3rd, or the first Monday after the new year, and ends when it has finished its legislative work near the end of the year. A joint session can occur between the House and Senate for special occasions. So, for example, the declaration of war or a State of the Union address. The Constitution states that the Vice President is the presiding officer over the Senate. When the Vice President cannot make it, the President pro tempore presides. Members of the Senate vote for the President pro tempore. So the Vice President and the President pro tempore are mainly symbolic. So, for example, when Joe Biden was Vice President, he was the leader of the Senate. Right now, Mike Pence is the leader of the Senate, and when Mike Pence is out on the campaign trail, you have President pro tempore Orrin Hatch. Party leaders and whips. In each house, members of the majority and minority parties have a floor leader and a floor whip. So the majority leader in the House of Representatives is Henry McCarty for the Republicans, and Nancy Pelosi for the minority leader is Nancy Pelosi for the Democrats. In the Senate, we have Mitch McConnell as the majority leader and Chuck Schumer for the minority leader for the Democrats. Floor leaders act as spokespersons for their parties. They work to persuade members of both parties to vote for specific laws. Whips assist the floor leaders in communicating with party members. So they're like an assistant. They whip members into shape. Caucuses are when or where political parties pick their leaders. So the Speaker of the House is the highest officer in the House of Representatives. He's elected by members of the House to make sure that everything runs smoothly, that he's a member of the majority party, and the party with less than half the seats is called the minority party. Duties of the Speaker of the House. They assign legislation to committees for discussion and preparation. They decide the legislative agenda for a session of the House, and I don't know why that looks like that, I'm sorry. They decide when and who can speak on an issue. So they're kind of like a big deal. Committees. Congress divides itself into different committees that focus on a specific subject areas. Examples include education, agriculture, science, etc. This is often led by a chairperson who guides and sets priorities for their committees. Members are chosen by their political parties, and it's usually because they have some kind of background or connection to that area. Committees have three main roles. They research specific subjects, holding hearings to get advice from experts. They write legislation, which means they write laws that are related to their specific subject areas, and they decide whether to send the legislation to the floor, which means that it's important enough for a vote. There are four types of committees. You have a standing committee, the joint, select, and a conference. So standing committee, these are permanent groups set up that are responsible for specific subject areas. And then they're divided into subcommittees. So for example, we have Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, Agriculture, and Education, because those are things that our nation deals with on a regular basis. A joint committee is a permanent committee made up of members of both houses. So that's the House of Representatives and the Senate. They investigate issues and make recommendations, but they don't write bills. A select committee is a committee that's created to study an issue or an event. So this is like a one-time thing. For example, the Energy Independence and Global Warming Committee. Then you have a conference committee. These are committees that are formed when the two houses can't agree on the details of a bill. And this is what we have with the coronavirus relief package, the second one. They have a conference committee. So let's watch the Facts of Congress video.
Congress must consider and debate hundreds of very important matters. Imagine what it would look and sound like if the entire Congress discussed each and every topic before it. Well, thankfully, members of both the House and Senate belong to individual committees that focus on a particular subject, like education or the environment. When a member introduces a bill that he or she would like to see become law, it is immediately sent to a committee where it is studied in detail. Committee members hear experts talk about why this particular bill is or isn't a good idea. They pass their findings on to the rest of Congress. So when you think of where much of the work really gets done in Congress, think committees. And that's another fact of Congress.
It's just a little goofy video. So now we're on to the powers of Congress. So we have the expressed powers. These are powers that are specifically stated in Article 1 of the Constitution. So examples are they decide how to raise money by setting taxes and borrowing funds, decide how to spend money for the benefit of the nation, they regulate commerce among states and foreign nations, they declare war and create an army and a navy, they coin money, they regulate the process of becoming a citizen, and they create post offices. Then we have the implied powers. These are powers the Constitution gives Congress that are not listed in detail, but they're applied. The Constitution gives Congress the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper. This is known as the elastic clause because it's like a rubber band. You can bend it and shape it at will so that it makes sense for what you're doing. For example, they collect taxes. Members don't go collect taxes directly. They created the IRS. So because it's in their powers, their express powers to collect taxes, they can create a agency like the IRS that can do that in their stead. That's an implied power. Special powers. The Senate has 4 special powers. You have the trials of impeachment are held in Senate after the House impeaches an official. The Senate chooses the vice president if no vice presidential candidate receives enough electoral votes. We don't really have that problem anymore. They approve treaties with other countries with a 2/3 vote, and they approve presidential appointments, for example, all federal judges and justices, diplomats, ambassadors, and department heads. Unique powers of the House of Representatives is impeachment or formally accuse of wrongdoing government officials, most importantly, the president. They choose the president if there is no majority in the Electoral College, and they create appropriation bills, which is where the money goes. The writ of habeas corpus. This is the right to know what you are tried for. Congress cannot take away due process except during civil war or invasion, and they cannot show favoritism or give titles of nobility. Limits on power. No ex post facto laws. These are laws that make an act illegal, then allow the government to punish those who committed the act before it was made illegal. No bill of attainder. These are laws that provide for the punishment of specific people or group of people without a trial. So now we're on to the last part, which is how a bill becomes a law. So first we have an introduction. The introduction of a bill is a proposed law. Any member of either house can introduce a bill. The ideas for bills come from the president, businessmen, farmers, and ordinary citizens like you and me. Bills can be introduced in both houses. The only exception to this rule is an appropriations bill, which is one approving the spending of money, which must begin in the House of Representatives. The process starts by a member sponsoring or introducing this bill. The bill is then sent to a committee. It's a standing committee. The subject of the bill determines which committee will receive the bill. The committee can decide to make no changes, rewrite the bill, or ignore the bill, which kills the chance of it becoming a law. They send it to a subcommittee for more study and investigation. So that's where they really do their research and they hear from experts to see if it would be a good idea. If a bill is sent to a subcommittee, the subcommittee then reports back to the larger committee and decides what to do with the bill. The larger committee then votes to send it to the House floor to be debated. If the floor votes no, the bill is sent back to the committees. If it votes yes, it's sent to the other house of Congress because both houses have to approve it. So on to the Senate. Even if the bill is passed by the House, it still has to go in committee in the Senate because now it's their turn. Unlike the House, senators in the Senate are not limited in how long they can debate a bill. The act of talking a bill to death is known as a filibuster. The bill is then discussed amongst all senators, and again, amendments can be proposed at this time, which is changes to the bill. A vote in the Senate to end debate is known as a cloture. The conference committee resolves any differences between the House and Senate versions of the bill, and the bill is then sent back to both houses for a final vote. Approved bills are sent to the president, who can sign the bill into law or veto it, or pocket veto, which means Congress isn't in session. If the president vetoes the bill, it's sent back to the House and Senate where they can vote to override the veto with a 2/3 majority vote. And then finally, the bill becomes a law. And so here's a little chart for you. Again, this is in your modules on your Canvas, and it's the second to last slide. And our last slide is a video. This song will be stuck in your head for the rest of the day. Not that song.
Whew, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to the Capitol building here in Washington. But I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long week while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called that local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." And he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I'm still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'm waiting online with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By
old.
that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
All right, so that's the end of this PowerPoint. So go back into your Edgenuity, or I'm sorry, not Edgenuity, your Canvas, and start on lesson 1.